I have been collecting video games ever since I got the Nintendo Entertainment System for Christmas when I was 7. I would get more video game systems as the years went on, and when I replaced old systems, they either were sold in garage sales or I put them up in my parents' attic. I did hold on to some of my older games, but I didn't consider myself a collector until much later. One instance of collecting that really kicked things off was when I started hanging out more with a guy that I work with named Dave. And basically what we did was after work we would hang out at his parents' house because his parents lived closer than mine. And we would play this game called Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo for the Sony PlayStation. And we would play this game nonstop until one day he let me know that he had lent it to a girl at school, and before he was able to get it back, the girl had moved to Texas and took the game disc with her. So we did the logical step and we went on to eBay to try to find it. And the thing about Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo at the time was that it was very expensive in the year 2000, and it was $100 for a loose copy and $150 for a complete set. Not necessarily something that two people on a corner store salary could afford at the time, so we had to figure out alternative options. And we got the PC version, and the PC version was okay, but there weren't controllers like there are today. And then we got the Dreamcast version, which turned out to be a counterfeit, but the Dreamcast controller wasn't as comfortable as the PlayStation controller. So we gave up on that pursuit for the PlayStation version, but we still stuck together and we still played all of these different games and we tried to beat them. And he would even give me games that I hadn't even played before, like Alundra for the PlayStation. That game was so much fun that I spent 2 days playing it, and like I just couldn't put it down. Then Dave and I, we were a year apart, so I would go off to college and he would stay behind in high school. But during the summer we would still hang out, and we'd either go to Great America or we'd play more video games in my parents' basement. Then 2003 rolled around, and we decided that it would be really cool to get an apartment in the city. And one of the things that we had discussed, besides furniture, was to put together a list of 20 Nintendo games that we would love to play on a regular basis. And we had modded Xboxes at the time, so I was a little hesitant at first, but games were very inexpensive at the time, and GameStop still sold NES cartridges, so it was really easy for me to stop at a GameStop and just try to fill up the list. And it wasn't too long until I actually completed our first NES set. And so the games are that I can remember what we put together was Mega Man 1 through 6, Legend of Zelda, Tecmo Bowl, Tecmo Super Bowl, Bad News Baseball, Joust, Bubble Bobble, Clue Clue Land, Super Mario Bros. 1, 2, and 3, RBI Baseball, Ninja Gaiden, Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, and Metroid. Now, these games, they're not necessarily rare, but they were from our childhood, or they were just really fun games to play at the time, and they were very easy to get, except for Mega Man 1. Mega Man 1, I spent $20 getting it from eBay to put on my shelf, but the last game that I was able to acquire was Mega Man 6 from GameStop for only $8. And we could have stopped there, but we decided to think of other more games that we played, as children. Mutant League Football, Mutant League Hockey, Marble Madness, Altered Beast. I mean, there's so many other games that we acquired during that time that, I can't think of off the top of my head. But there was this game store called Game Crazy, and it was linked to the local Hollywood Video, and they had a ton of Nintendo games for really inexpensive, and one of the games that I got was Duck Hunt for 99 cents. And even though I had the combo pack, the Super Mario Duck Hunt that everybody had, that's one of the first times that I decided to get a game solely because of its uniqueness, even though I already had the game. I even collected other games that I hadn't heard of before, like Ikaruga. I heard about that from the best page in the universe, Maddox, and so I was able to pick that up as well. And eventually I would start to collect all these other things that I wanted when I was a kid, like a TurboGrafx 16 and a Power Glove that I found in an NES lot for $40. And I really wanted to go all out, but I was only making $8 an hour at the time, so I really had to, keep it reeled in. And I could have collected a little bit more, but that's when we stopped and we started playing World of Warcraft. And we spent a lot of time on that. And yeah, I did meet a lot of my friends who I'm still friends with today. And we just put so much more time into that there wasn't time for anything else. And in fact, Dave, he almost got kicked out of school because he played World of Warcraft so much. We had to kick him out of the guild, and he didn't take kindly to that, and it put a real strain on our relationship because he stopped being friends with some of the other people that I still hung out with. But Dave and I, we still remained best friends. Then in 2006, that's when I finally decided to move out of the city. And that's when Dave, he convinced me. He's like, you really got to get out of here, and we'll get an apartment together. And so I did, and I'm really glad that I made the leap because I got a new job and I started meeting more people. But in May of 2007, that's when Dave, he let me know. He's like, hey, I got to focus on school, so I'm gonna move back in with my parents. And I had only lived in the city for a year, and I didn't meet a whole bunch of people just yet. So I decided to move back in with my parents, and I still kept my job in the city. So that's a 46-mile commute each way. And I did that every weekday for the entire summer, and I put like 3,000 miles on my car. But in July, that's when my coworker, she gave me a puppy, and I was going to name him Cloud or Rufus, but Dave, he suggested I name him Bowser, and I was like, that's actually a really good name, so it stuck. And so I had Bowser, and then in August I met a girl, and she lived in the city, so it became harder and harder to balance what to do. And because I would see her overnight, and then I would have to go back to let Bowser out, and then by 3 o'clock in the morning I would get home, and then only to wake up again at 6 o'clock to drive back to the city so that I can be at work on time. So she was like, well, why don't you just live back in the city? And again, like, Dave wasn't really ready to move back in just yet, but there was a girl that we had known on World of Warcraft, and she wanted a roommate, so I was about to move in with her. And then Dave, he called me, and he's like, hey, do you want to move in the city with me again? And I was like, of course, and so I called it off with the other person, and then we found an apartment, and this apartment was significantly better than the previous apartment. It was closer to the train station, and it was walking distance from Wrigley Field. And it also had a backyard for Bowser, which is unheard of in the city for what we were paying for it. We were paying like $900 a month for it. And so, I mean, it was a no-brainer to live there. And so we had a pretty nice setup. Like, we put the TV on one end, and Dave, he would play Modern Warfare with his brothers online. I think it was the first Modern Warfare, and my collection, or our collection at the time, was on the opposite side. And actually, if you look here, I got this picture that you can just barely make it out, and at the time the DVDs that we had outnumbered the collection that we had. And so it was a pretty good time up until November. And November was when my mom passed away. And she was 50 at the time, and it was pretty sudden. It came out of nowhere. So I was pretty depressed about that because it was so close to Thanksgiving to lose a family member like that. And my boss, she gave me my Christmas gift early because she felt sorry for me, and it was Mario and Sonic at the Olympics. But I had exchanged it for Mario Galaxy, and so that definitely kept my mind off of things. Then in early December, Dave and I, we hosted a party, an apartment party, but there was this huge ice storm, so not a lot of people could have made it because it was so dangerous to go out. So we ended up playing Wii Sports and Guitar Hero with whoever had made it. Then in mid-December, my other friends, they had invited me out to this rock show at the House of Blues. And it was a really great night, and then I woke up with like a sore throat, and I was kind of run down, and I just wasn't feeling any better. So I went to this, immediate care clinic, and they said that I had mono. And so that meant that I had to take a long time off of work and then be put into quarantine. So I went out to my dad's house, and I didn't have time to take my video games, but it was really quiet because, my mom had just passed, but it wasn't like I could play video games a lot because I would just pass out at random periods of time and just wake up out of nowhere. And then Christmas Eve rolled around, and I was feeling better, and I was able to walk around the house a lot more without having to, rest. And that's when the phone rang. And it was Dave's phone number, and so I picked it up, and it wasn't Dave. It was Dave's dad. And he let me know that there was a car accident, and Dave, he had passed away. And my mom being, just passed away, the previous month prior, I was pretty numb about it. And the only thing that I remember, asking Dave's dad was, is there anything that I can do for you? And he says, well, just, can you please tell your friends and stuff like that? So more details will be followed. So I called a couple of friends, and then I, went back to bed to process the whole thing. So at the funeral, it was, revealed that Dave, he was going to be buried with the game Call of Duty Modern Warfare that he played so much with his brothers. Like, he played this game so much that he bought his brothers an Xbox so that they could play together. I mean, like, that's how much they enjoyed that game. And then I got this fish, and I'll put it up here. It's not too significant to someone who doesn't know what it means, but there's only 4 of them. One belongs to me, one belongs to Dave's dad's best friend, another belongs to Dave's dad, and the other one is buried with Dave. And it was a sentimental, gesture. Then January rolled around, and that's when Dave's parents needed to come and pick up Dave's belongings. And so I made sure to be out of the house during the time because I wanted to give him some time. But one of the things that I had requested was to have some of Dave's video games, just as a memento. And, he agreed, Dave's dad agreed. So I was able to get a whole bunch of PlayStation RPGs and Cookie and Cream for the PlayStation 2. And so that meant a lot to me. And so 2007, it was bad. But 2008 was kind of worse. I had to find a roommate in January, and finding a roommate during that time is really difficult. So I got a real piece of work that, didn't really work out too well, and I was able to move out at the end of 2008. And then in the middle of 2009, March or so, my girlfriend had broke up with me. And so that's, all the depression and all that other stuff, that's when I hit rock bottom. And so I was finally able to heal and start being more sociable with people and, going out and having fun. And 6 months later, I met my future wife. I got a better job. I started collecting again. I have over 800 pieces of video games now in my collection, but I always still think about Dave, and when this video is posted, it'll be his 35th birthday. And I always take pause to listen to him, and think of him and just think of like all the crazy things that like he would have experienced if he was still around. Like, what would he have thought of the Nintendo Switch or the PlayStation 4 or VR? If I added some piece of, game to the collection, like what would he think about that? And, that's kind of how, I can remember him. And, one thing that I hadn't mentioned till now was the Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo. Now, I told you that we gave up on it, and obviously it's not worth $100 to $150 anymore, but the girl who Dave lent that game to, she came back a year later, and Dave asked about the Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo, and she's like, oh, well, I sold all my games to GameStop. And he's like, oh, like, I really wish that she still had that Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo. Well, it turns out that since she only had the disc, GameStop wouldn't take the game. And if you can believe that GameStop would only take a loose copy. So she still had it, and Dave had the case. So I was able, along with the other games that I inherited, was able to hold on to Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo. And this is the game that the exact copy that Dave and we played so many years ago. It's got the original disc, all the manual, it's all there. And while it's not worth a lot, on the full market value, it's priceless to me. And if I ever get rid of all these games, or if something ever happens, like, I'll always make sure that I keep this particular game because it's so important to me. And so I really appreciate anybody else who's here at the end of this video. I mean, it means a lot to me that you guys are still watching, and I'm glad that I could share this video on Dave's birthday. And I hope that this story was, interesting to you, and I'm glad that I'm able to share it. So happy birthday, Dave, and wherever you are, I hope that you're playing Super Puzzle Fighter 2 or some other awesome game, up there and stuff, and I'll make sure that I play around for you